top supplier of weapons and military alliances and military bases and launcher of wars, and could launch a massive global reverse arms race in a heartbeat, could disarm half the world by simply ceasing to arm it. So these are not equivalent in this sense. Remember these guys, we were just talking about the need to maybe not forget one of these guys. Both of these guys had lawyers in the White House literally redefine the word imminent to mean, this is basically the legal definition for the United States, not the rest of the world. Hell, I don't know, maybe someday. This is what imminent means. And it seems that the US government actually takes that seriously and uses the word in that sense now. Trying to see. Okay. So this is the bigger context, right? This is risking nuclear war. We all remember packing the streets in February of 2003 because some jackasses were lying about a country having nukes that didn't have nukes. Now, the country in play here has got half the nukes on Earth. And nobody's even mentioning it, much less telling lies about it. And we're not in the streets. Basically, most of us in any numbers. This is insanity. Nothing. There's no possible outcome that's not better than risking nuclear war. You may have seen that President Biden has proposed a bigger military spending bill than he proposed last time, which was bigger than any of Trump's, which were bigger than Obama's, and so forth. This is the course of things, and you can't do this without an enemy. The enemy, whatever flaws there may be in it itself, is desperately needed and deeply valued as an enemy. You can't do it with Middle Eastern terrorists anymore. You have to have Russia and or China, and there's always money for that. And there's always money to send more weapons to Eastern Europe. But there's not money for anything we actually need. This is the situation in Ukraine. This is one of these, CNN election maps like they do in the US with the red states and the blue states. And Crimea's at the bottom. The two regions at the far right are the ones that are in play here, with both sides threatening to invade them if the other side does first. And you'll be told that Russia already invaded 8 years ago and has never left, which is only true on a tiny sort of scale compared to what they're announcing daily Russia is about to do. You'll be told that Ukraine, by definition, can't invade itself. It's part of Ukraine. But the arrangement in the Minsk II agreements, for what they're worth, with neither side complying with them, is for these regions to self-govern, not to be an independent nation, not to be part of Russia, but to have a great deal of autonomy and self-governance, which Ukraine doesn't want them to. And if the U.S. military rolled tanks into California, you couldn't say, well, this isn't really happening because it can't be by definition. It would be happening. This is the longer, historical context here. The Cold War supposedly ended. Germany reunited into one scary large Germany, and Russia said, okay, that's okay with us. But they were promised by the US government that NATO would not expand eastward. Well, very shortly, it began expanding eastward, and you can see it's now within the old boundaries of the Soviet Union, closer to Russia, in fact, on the border of Russia, as it never was during the supposed existence of the Cold War, and with missiles in Poland and Romania aimed at Russia. This is the problem. Russia is scared of this and is making demands exactly identical to what the U.S. made when there were Russian missiles in Cuba, and what the U.S. would be making if there were Russian missiles anywhere near the United States. The notion that what's at stake here is something called the rule-based order, and that the United States has anything to do with leading it, and that the seizure of Crimea was the major threat to peace and harmony of the past quarter century, is absolutely nuts. Yes, Russia should not have its military in Crimea. Yes, you should not have votes with militaries present. Yes, Russia's military should be abolished, as should every military on earth. But when you're talking about upper extreme estimates of casualties in this horrendous seizure of Crimea of a grand total of, count them, 6, when the U.S. has been waging war after war after war with the corpses piled up in the millions, and when the U.S. is the major holdout on basic human rights treaties, and the major opponent of the International Criminal Court, and wages wars, and threatens wars in violation of all of these treaties and agreements listed on this slide, it's just too hypocritical to take seriously. The other thing that's missing from the story that we're always told is the coup. Yes, there's been an election. Yes, the president is Jewish. My God, how many thousands of times do people have to tell me this? But governments always have elections following coups. It doesn't always change the fundamental state of the government. And this is an extreme case of a U.S. supported coup in two senses. In one sense, because it's immediately completely erased from consciousness. And in the second sense, because we have what people always dream of. We have actual audio recordings of U.S. officials planning it and photographs of them coming to the protest in the square and handing out pastries. This was 8 years ago, a coup that put in place a government and a military with Nazi elements, with anti-Russian and ethnic Russian elements, with an immediate ban on the Russian language, with right-wing violence and mobs. And so you then had this so-called seizure of Crimea, which, by the way, included a vote. And, Crimea is a very weird case that it was formerly part of Russia, then it was part of the USSR, but so was Ukraine and Russia and so forth. It's not technically a colony. It's not supposed to get to vote on where it becomes part of. But then, neither is Quebec or Scotland, and we don't have a panic attack. And the fact is that Ukraine could vote 1,000 more times, and it would never once vote to be part of Ukraine. So, if you're going to support small d democracy, you have to take that at least somewhat seriously. Major war rehearsals, war games, biggest in 75 years, closest to Russia in 75 years, leading up to the supposed Russian creation of this crisis. Buildup of weapons across Europe. The countries that are not blue on this map have U.S. bases. The countries that have a little nuclear bomb on them have nuclear weapons. 5 of them, arguably illegally, have U.S. nuclear weapons in this picture. these are dates circled on an article from last year about the buildup of weapons and forces and military drills on the good side, the Ukrainian side of Donbass, not the Russian side. And so we should keep the chronology straight. This is what happened was not a massive Russian buildup of troops followed by a Ukrainian buildup of troops. If anything, it was the other way around. As I said earlier, imagine walking a mile in their moccasins. Imagine if it was Russian weapons and forces on the U.S. border, how reasonable the demands to get them the hell out of here would sound. The propaganda, I mean, this is why I wrote a book called War is a Lie years ago, to help people spot the lies. They're recycled. I mean, this is the greenest thing, the biggest recycling operation the U.S. government does. They use these same lies. Every government is reduced to a single person who's reduced to Hitler. But Russia is not conquering territory. Conquest and occupation are virtually gone and have been for longer than I've been alive. Hitler is dead. How can you tell when an advocate for war is lying? Their wallet is growing. The financial interests here are so clear. The weapons companies, the CEOs are talking up their excitement, their glee over this possible war. It's shameless. So you have these debates in the corporate media. More weapons to stop the Russian aggression, more diplomacy and negotiation to stop the Russian aggression. The whole point of which is to make the agreed upon basis for the debate unquestionable, so that it's unthinkable that what we're dealing with is anything other than Russian aggression. The global hotspots, including Ukraine, all have one thing in common, and it's based in Washington, D.C. We ought to consider that fact. We ought to maybe take seriously all the Munich appeasement talk, but wonder who it is that's being appeased. Because I think it's the major media outlets, it's the major weapons dealers, it's the bought and paid for Congress members, it's the people in the State Department and the Pentagon pushing for more and more hostility and militarism. Why is nobody, even a US president, ever asked to stand up to them and stop appeasing them? This thing has gone on so long, and they've needed a new version, a new story every day, that they're saying the little quiet parts out loud. They're putting on the front page of the New York Times the interest of U.S. oil companies in blocking Russian gas to Europe. This was a useful issue of Peace Science Digest this month, with studies on how threatened or actual harm can provoke an adversary rather than coerce them. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing this madness where you threaten war supposedly to prevent war, with the exact opposite effect. Try to get to questions here. These are some photos of a peace demonstration in Kiev at the U.S. Embassy, with a list of U.S. wars and a request for the U.S. to get out. The president of Ukraine, again, has echoed these sentiments to a certain extent. He's objected to the war is happening in 2 days nonsense. And then, the pretense that the buildup and the threats has had some positive effect, and Russia is newly open to talks. We've had that headline, quite a number of times in recent weeks, but we've never had Russia is closed to talks. That, never happened. And this is a pattern. It's a pattern. We can talk about World War II, getting the war in Korea started, and numerous other examples. You build up to war, you provoke, you have an arms race, you have threats and provocations from both sides, and then you pretend it was all the other guy's fault. These are a number of useful websites. Again, this first one is where you can find everything I'm showing you here and a lot more. There's also nowarinUkraine.org. blackallianceforpeace.com has a Ukraine website. and stop sharing. How many minutes did I go over? Oh.